And during this meditation, I was shown this visual. And so I wrote it down, I drew it out, and with that visual came all the information that I needed to explain what timelines are. And a lot of people have asked me since then if I could do another one because they didn't get it enough, or now they want to hear it again for various reasons. Somebody was tired. I've been asked a few times to do it again. So I decided to do it again. So my birthday month, like all of us, our birthday month is our power month. Anything you want to do that's very special, if you want to present something or accomplish something special, anything you want to do, try to plan it for your birthday month. That's when the sun, which has all the power, is in your sign. And it's a nice little thing to know to help you along with your life decisions. So I started to revisit the timelines in my mind, and then I was confident that I had the drawing because I'm very organized and I keep things in a certain way. And I could not find the drawing. And I looked in the places where I just reach up, take out that book, and that's where the drawing should be, and couldn't find it. I looked through all those journals, and it was nowhere. So for some reason, that just disappeared. And then what happened was, I meditate every day at various times, and it's nice when I have a whole day of peace, and I can just go into meditation not from being excited or anxious about being out in the world, things that happen, but go into meditation from a peaceful place. And so I like to do that. And I began to get information that I was told would go beyond the timelines. We want to move forward. We don't want to just repeat what we said 2 years ago. We want to move forward. And so I started to get what you see behind me. And as soon as I started to get it, it was so beautiful. I think I was brushing my teeth or something. And I was getting ready in the morning, going through my routine, the shower. Oftentimes I get stuff when I'm doing that kind of thing. It's like a meditation when you're in the shower or brushing. And so I ran to write it down. And as I was writing it down, it came out like poetry, so beautiful. And when I was in the middle, I wrote this, and then I think it was another day that I got this. And somewhere in the middle, I started to get, I'm not that great with names, but I occasionally get a name. I started to just see the name Maimonides. So I know that when you're doing certain kinds of work, certain spiritual beings who have lived on earth or may not have, but they step in to help you because that's their expertise. So writers call it their muses. That's what the muse is. When you're writing, the writing spirit will come and stand beside you and help you write. And all writers know what that feels like. And when I was writing my books, I wrote 2 biographies, I felt the spirit standing next to me, and whenever I felt that, there was no editing that was required. So it's a certain thing. So I'm doing the timelines, I get this really high, energetic being coming in, saying that it's Maimonides. And then I researched Maimonides a little bit. Of course, I know that he's a great man, and he was considered the finest physician in the world in his time, which was about the 12th century. And he was a Jewish rabbi, and he was not only the finest physician in the world, but the King of Spain had him as his own private physician. He was also a world-renowned philosopher and mathematician. So he was quite a man, and he was revered, of course, even after his death, revered much more for his brilliant, unique thinking. And so I feel that this is very authentic. I know the feel when I'm receiving my information. So let's start with the timeline review. The timelines are about our consciousness. Our consciousness fits into the template of the timeline of our time, whatever time we live in. And it's expressed, our consciousness is expressed through that particular timeline. Now, what are timelines? We know that on Earth, time is a linear thing. It's yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and we're somewhere over here, and tomorrow we'll be over here, and a week later there, and on and on and on. That's the way we measure time here. Time, you know, does not exist when you're outside the Earth. It's only something, as we know it, of the Earth. Now, the original timeline was the creation of the world, and all life on it is the original timeline. And right now, the movie Thrive is hot on the internet. I must have gotten 5 emails from friends saying, here's the link, you got to watch this movie Thrive. And I hate to tell each one that I already saw it. I want everyone to feel good, but I've seen it. And it talks about creation and how everything on Earth was designed and created to thrive, to work in synchronicity together. And what do we have today? We have a world that does not thrive. We have a world that is deconstructing and falling apart because of various reasons. And the most important reason that it's happening is because we have been removed from the original timeline of creation. When we read in the Bible of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that was, it's an allegory, but that is the original time on Earth, original creation of beautiful beings. I think that the reason it says they were unclothed is because I think original human beings were not even in bodies like we have. I think that originally it was enlightened beings of light. There's no need for clothing. They lived purely. The whole earth, in all its grandeur and beauty, was pure and loving and connected to the higher realms and completely aware and awake. And then along came a race of beings, and I'm not going to say where because there are so many names out there. I've studied Zecharia Sitchin, and a lot of you have. I've read all his books. But there are other races besides the Anunnaki. And I'm not going to tell you which ones they are and what star systems they came from because it doesn't fit into this talk. But different races of beings have been here. Now the first intervention understood, because they had this knowledge, that the way to gain power over these enlightened beings that lived here was not through coercion, because they were light beings, and you couldn't put a rope around them and haul them off into an enclosure, but was through infiltrating into the mind foreign ideas that had not existed, such as jealousy, such as fear, such as competition. These kinds of negative thoughts were somehow beamed into these original beings that were created to live in harmony. And that's how we get the story of Cain and Abel. And that is the beginning of aggression. Truly the beginning. What could be more aggressive than brother against brother? So it shows the extent to which that first original timeline is now changed. So if you can see the original timeline, for instance, like this, after that would come, every timeline after that is narrow. Narrow, narrow. Why? Because infinite intelligence creates expansion and beauty and love, which is, it just expands on its own. But forced timelines for the purpose of control do not expand on their own. They need a lot of reinforcement. And through the years, we have had many interventions, many different timelines, and what is the purpose? The idea is control the earth, control humanity. How can you best control humanity? If you get them to forget that they have a soul, that they are connected to infinite intelligence, that they are truly beautiful golden light beings, make them forget all that, lower the energy so that they become physical beings who are now subject to cold and heat and disease and miscommunication in their minds, receiving inspiration that is not always of the highest, and just letting it go where it goes. It would be like giving, two children loaded pistols, So this is what has happened in a very short review of timelines until we find ourselves today, which is at the very end of the cycle. We are now at the very end of the cycle that we know. We might be able to access information previous to what we know that's contained in our Bible or in the Sumerian texts, which actually go beyond our Bible, but fill in the blanks. And we find ourselves now at the end of the cycle, and we are in this timeline. And what does this timeline mean? What is it composed of? It's composed of unrelenting fear injection, control mechanisms to keep us so far removed from who we truly are that all we think of is materialism. Everything is physical. The physical is taken over all of our existence, so that in order to, hi Carolyn, hi, hello, fine to see you. No, it's okay. Here, take a chair. There's a chair. You want to sit over here?
There's somebody here. There's somebody there.
Like to do? So basically, I'm starting out by giving a review of the timeline talk that I did 2 years ago. So we find ourselves now in the current timeline. And we can see now clearly how in our recorded history, it has led us to this time where people have to relearn, that's the new age, about the spiritual quality that we all possess. Right now, people are waking up again to who we truly are. But what is that struggle? We are struggling against the mass media, against something that Orson Welles had in his mind of creating a one-world resource. And now that internet is the one-world resource, and it's a wonderful resource for sure. But like everything else, it can go both ways. And so the mass media, through CNN, through all the control of our newspapers and information that is out. We know that our newspapers are the spokespeople for our government, and so it's no longer independent research. It's taking down notes from what they're given, and so on. And the wars that we have, and the way we feel helpless to do anything about it, that is all part of the controlling timeline that we live in now. And so the struggle is getting ourselves out of that matrix, truly, climbing out of the matrix into an open mind. That's what our journey is about. And we are doing it. It seems to us when we go out into our lives, into the places where we work and where we congregate, meet our friends, it seems to us that we're the only ones. That our family, our friends, our co-workers don't always know what we're talking about when we talk about these existential things and UFOs and other beings coming here. But there are a lot of people like us, and this is something that is a worldwide movement, and it's meant to happen, and it is happening. And the more we open, the more we align ourselves with that the desire for the higher truth, and we start learning higher truths, and we align ourselves with it, and we desire it, we draw to us these beings, highly evolved beings of light, who come to us as muses in our meditations to bring us enlightening information. And that's available to all of us, to every single one of us, in our dreams, in our waking state, when we're sort of like, tuning out, when we're meditating, when we're sleeping. Some people are familiar with out-of-body experiences. We are waking up and having it, and there's a lot of fear surrounding opening up because in the past timelines, many of us have been tortured and burned at the stake and had our lives ruined just for dabbling or talking or doing what we knew was the truth. So that's a synopsis of the timelines. Would anybody like to ask a question or add what you know?
I read that your creation.
Before we talk about this, we just want to do the timelines, then we'll talk about this. Do we all understand what I'm talking about?
So
It makes sense to you?
a timeline is really like a state of
That's
consciousness.
exactly what it is. Exactly what it is, a state of consciousness.
Talking about being persecuted because of certain psychic abilities. I used to always tell my wife I thought she was drowned, but she could not stand water over her head. I used to try to get her in a shower. I said, look, it's not going to hurt. Let the water run over your head. She could catch her breath. And I said, well, in your past life you were sort of psychically gifted, and somebody said it's not supposed to be, and get you underneath the water.
You said end of the cycle, right?
We are now at the end of the 26,000-year cycle.
What
And
is
that
this?
is why we're having so much chaos, because everything has to be resolved. All the karma of the past has to be resolved now. It must be. We can't stop it.
Every certain number of years is the end of year, human population by war, whatever. That is 5,126 years. That end of the year, there's going to be a war. Same thing happened in Mahabharata war. Now, reach that point by 2017, not 12 actually. The calculation, European calculation, they did not use 0 century. When there's 0 century, there are 5 years left. They're going to be not 12, actually 17. So now that's what you're talking about.
Well, to me, I prefer not to quibble about whether it's 2012 or 2017, because in the long scheme of things,
And
and
people don't know
really,
which one
if you
actually
look
is.
at it from the top, another 5 or 10 years or 20 years, it may matter in our everyday life to us if we're waiting for something to happen, but the idea is we have to live in the present moment. And the comment that you made about consciousness is exactly what it is. Each timeline has its own human consciousness. That's what it is. That's what the mass mind is, the mass consciousness, believing in the same kinds of things. That's what's created in these particular timelines as we go along. So
Just want to expand. So that state of Eden, symbolized with Eden before being kicked out, that was a state of wholeness, where the mind of man was in harmony with the source.
With
And,
all,
and,
yes.
and at that point, the mind was still a true servant. The mind was expanded and could flow with that ever-expanding nature of creation. But then something happened, like you were saying, and something was able to infiltrate and capture the mind somehow and bring it into a kind of corralling the mind down a narrow path, and that could then be programmed. And one of the ways that I think about the programming is how people tend to think along lines of either yes or no, this or that, like the 1 and 0, a binary consciousness, good and evil, and right and wrong, all this strict duality. And I could see how in that Eden mind, that wouldn't have existed, that duality wouldn't have existed.
Right, exactly. The original creation was about people who were fully evolved and connected. There was no separation. So, of course, now mind control is down to a science, and it's being utilized and practiced and put in place all over the place. We know that. So that's what we're struggling to find out. This is the good news. Once you start to break out, once that window opens a little crack, that's just the beginning, and then everything else starts to open up faster and faster for you, especially now, the time is speeding up. Everything happens faster, so all you need is a little crack to understand that the reality that you thought yesterday was everything really isn't everything. And then you start to seek and learn, and everything's out there for us. But of course, there's a lot of misinformation mixed in, and that's where discernment comes in. We all must practice discernment now more than ever. And what is discernment? How do I know that what you know is right or wrong, and what I think I know is right or wrong? Here it is. It's right here. This is where your discernment, right in your intuition. And science has now acknowledged. I was at a lecture up in Kopalu, and a medical doctor was talking about stress. And she said that science has now acknowledged that we have more brain cells in this part of our body than we have in this part of our body. So when you get that feeling in here, and we all know what it is, and if you don't know what it is, you better get acquainted with it fast and get to know. This is where you will know if something is resonating with you or if it's not resonating with you. And don't worry about what anyone else says. It either resonates with you or it doesn't. Tomorrow you might change your mind, or the next day. But right now, this resonates with you or it doesn't. We don't want to know something and say, that's it, I'm done, because that is static. So even things, and when static leads to death, so we're always in movement. We're always moving. Our cells are constant movement, they must. That's life. So our knowledge is also always moving. There's always something that we're going to learn tomorrow that will shift a little bit what we learned today. So you feel it here, and you remain open-minded to allow new information to come into you the next day or the next week. And the more you put yourself out there and look for it, it will come to you. Go by your intuition. Don't adopt a guru. Listen to a lot of different voices, and sometimes you'll find that one person, you align yourself with one thing they say, but you don't like this, or another person, the same thing, and you just create a compendium for yourself of what resonates with you. It's your consciousness. You're evolving your own soul in this physical life, so it's your consciousness that you're concerned with. And that eliminates all need for argument. We don't need to argue with each other. We can share with each other and have very interesting discussions, but try not to turn them into arguments, because it's useless. What else? Okay, so, thank you. If you think of anything you want to say about timelines, just, you can say it any time. This is what I got that I was describing before on 2 different days. And in the writing of it, when I wrote it, it made perfect sense to me. When I was rewriting it here, it also made perfect sense to me. So what I'd like to do is, this will take 15 minutes or less to read, all right? So the presentation isn't going to be over in 15 minutes. What I'd like to do is, I'd like to read it, read this, we'll talk about this, and then read that, we'll talk about that. Now, what I'd like to really do is, after I read this fully, I'd like to go back and we'll read each sentence together, just like we did when we were in first grade. But this is big stuff, and you can see how little writing it is for such big stuff. It's very succinct, and it's taking into account that I am not a scientist or a mathematician, and it needs to be explained in a way that the ordinary person who's halfway intelligent can kind of get it. So we're all sort of together in that, unless we have with us a particular scientist or mathematician who can help us in any way to understand it better. Please feel free to add your voice. Okay? I am a conduit. I'm a dedicated, truthful, life conduit. I don't claim to know everything, especially before I get it. After I get it, I kind of know it. I don't really have to read it, but I'm not the science mind, you know? But anyway, here we go. I'm asking for information on timelines, and all of a sudden I start to get a whole thing about the mind of humanity. The mind of humanity. Mankind's brain is terrestrial. It is of the earth, 3rd dimension. It is structured in physical form and exists in time. Mind of mankind is extraterrestrial. It has no structure. It is not of the earth. It is of the great oneness of unity consciousness. All is accessible through the mind of mankind. The mind of mankind, since it is extraterrestrial, exists outside of time. It is through the timelessness of mind, which is bound to soul, that mankind seeks the wisdom of the stars. The brain of mankind has limitations. The mind of mankind has no limitations. It is through the discipline of the mind that healing is accessed. The mind, the open, evolved mind, bound to the evolved soul, has capabilities which soar beyond time as it is known on earth. The closed mind remains bound to physical brain, and its reach is limited to the brain's physical capacity. Time travel is mind travel. And I wrote it big because I got it very loud. So that meant to me, write it big. So that's the first one. Hi, Liliana. So would you like to discuss it, or would you like to, yes?
Dr. Deepak Chopra always asks the question, does the mind create the brain, or does the brain create the mind? And he says that the mind creates the brain because when a person dies, the brain dies, but the mind goes on.
Exactly. Now, the open mind, bound to the evolved soul, has great power. And it has the power to imbue the brain with a higher consciousness. So when you have an evolved mind uplifting the human brain, you now have a very evolved human being whose capabilities soar, as they told me, beyond physical time on earth. So the mind, the consciousness, bound to the soul, is where it's at. That is what lives on. That's the eternal human, actually, the eternal being.
Can you talk a little bit about what you got or what you understand about the healing part, about healing or illness as, involved in this?
Well, to me, it was interesting because I'm a healer, so I felt that they were giving that to me specifically, but it also really relates to all of us. In my healing circle, what the true mission of the healing circle is to awaken each person to their own ability to heal themselves and their loved ones. We are designed to do that. We are designed to be in a place of perfect love with one another so that there would be no illness, there would be no disease, there would be nothing, not even accidents, because there would be no negative energy anywhere. It's only this timeline that we're living in now has us believing through the mass consciousness that what they pour out into our rooms through the TV about every day with illnesses and drugs and things, they get you programmed to expect to have certain things. So if your mind is beyond that and knows that you really are a perfect being in perfect health, it is only when you're in this physical body believing that which you have been mind controlled to believe that you then pick up illnesses and get what your friend has or what your relative has or something.
So when you're saying when we're in perfect unity or harmony with everything?
Yes. Yes.
And
That's
there's
the
no
second
illness,
part.
yeah, because I
Yes.
just wondered about that.
You see, the mind is such a powerful thing that it can create incredible healing and joy and love and peace, and the mind can also create destruction, war, hatred, and I'll tell you the secret, our minds have the power to make one another sick. I do distant healing every night. I have a long list of people who I can't reach in person, and I do my distant healings. People get healed through the distant healing. That's the discipline of the mind. When I am with that person, I may not have ever met them, I may know them, I may have different political views, I may have different philosophies. It matters not to me what a person's philosophy is or how they live their life. When I'm doing a healing, I am disciplined so that the mind is in a place of unity consciousness, so that the love that I am capable of radiating can reach that person purely and with a great deal of power to bring about a healing. There's no negativity. If I was transmitting negativity, the person wouldn't heal. Or if the receiver is keeping themselves in a place of negativity, they will have trouble healing. That's why I always say we take steps in our own behalf, and the angels will assist us. When we take steps on behalf of others, the angels blend their energy with us. That's how we were designed to function. But we don't know it because we're in this timeline that is a false timeline. That's what we're living in, a false time. I'm separate. What I have is mine, what you have is yours. I'm lucky I don't have what someone else has. They must have done something to get what they got. I mean, that's the kind of world we live in, of so much judgment. If we could eliminate all of that and be truly in the unity consciousness, we'd eliminate all sickness, all pain, and all wars. There'd be no reason to, if you could learn to love each other, the way we should.
When did this, I got here a little bit late, when did this timeline that we're in start? Did
The
it start in
creation.
the garden when you were talking
The
about-
original timeline began with original creation of life on earth where all was harmony.
Okay.
And people that we call human beings were light beings. They were fully evolved and they knew that they were connected to all that is. It was only when that timeline was interfered with, the first timeline that was created by another race of beings who came here, interfered and injected negative ideas into those beings that lived here for purpose of control. Jealousy, greed, hatred, things like that. Enabling people to act differently.
So is that the Anunnaki came here, or is that something before?
I said I wasn't going to name who they are because we know the Anunnaki, and there are other races of
There are
beings.
others
The
before.
Anunnaki, through Sitchin's work, would have you believe that they are it. But I don't believe that. They are one race, but certainly are not all the only. There are many that have come here. It wouldn't make sense that only one would come anyway.
I was just thinking, and this is kind of a subtle point, but it brought this up for me regarding the question of like dealing with illness, you know, and issues of healing. That I think part of healing isn't just like we all would like to have immediate cures to a condition we might be going through, so that we feel less limited. But I would say that part of healing is also in the way that we're looking at health, in the way that we're looking at our own limitations. Like, there's the brain's way, to use this language, there might be the brain's way to relate to illness, but there's also the mind's way of relating to illness. And my sense is that from the mind's perspective, it's not seeing the same thing that the brain does, the conditioned brain does. Illness is not seen as this thing that has to be gotten rid of, but it might see the lesson that is in it, that's within experiencing a limitation. Maybe the limitation is there because there's some sort of higher soul lesson and growth that needs to be learned through dealing with the challenge.
Okay.
So
I got you. That's good. Remember that we are being mind controlled. So through the mind control, our mind consciousness is being limited by the very nature of mind control. So the mind consciousness cannot conceive of what it's capable of, and therefore is not capable of uplifting the physical brain. Now, when we talk about illness and the lessons that we learn, we are talking about a timeline that is linear. Whereas we see ourselves getting born, we live, we die. We get born, we live, we die. But actually, we are one life. We were created, and we are eternal. Even this 26,000-year cycle is a very brief time in terms of eternity. So, yeah, you could say there are lessons. We're all cleaning up karma. We're trying to get back to where we were in the beginning, when everything was in harmony and it all was good. Remember, it was all good. It's not all good now. We're trying to get back to make it all good again. And that means all the things we have to do. Experience things, help ourselves lift out of negative ways, make restitutions to people that we need to make restitutions to from the past, have others make restitution to us. We're in this bog, of negativity, and we're struggling to climb out of it, and we are climbing out of it, and we must climb out of it, and we will. And many of us are actually climbed out of it, but we could be out of it in our minds, but we go back to work the next day or out into the world, and we have to fit in with our society.
So do you, since it was all perfect in the beginning, is there a reason, a purpose that we had to forget and be misled and go down this path, or is this just happenstance? You know what I mean? I just
Well,
wondered.
If you have a perfect world, and the word gets out in the cosmos that there's a perfect world, where everything is beautiful, somewhere, someone is going to want to go to that perfect world and benefit from it in their own way. And they are not part of that perfect world, but they come here to benefit themselves from it, okay? Then eventually you have, like you have now, you have many people walking around today are actually from other star systems who are here to help bring enlightenment. They're all around us. They're bringing out all kinds of enlightened information and help for us to expand our consciousness and grow out of the dark and into the light. And so it all began out of greed, the same old story. You just needed that first race of greedy beings to come here and try to gain control and power over what they found. An earth, a world rich in everything, and especially in beauty, and they wanted to capture it.
So are you saying that on every planet where there's life, intelligent life, that it starts in harmony? Is that how everything's created
I
in
don't know.
harmony?
We will get to that
Okay.
over here, okay? Here are the grids that Maria, in synchronicity, printed out and gave me these copies so that we can, these are grids. I would like everyone to take a look at the grids. They all come from the Flower of Life.
You looked at them?
These are grids,
They come from what?
Flower of Life.
I just want to address the subtlety of that point, of exactly when the corruption happens or how the corruption happens. Because it seems to me that for an outside element to come into a situation, the consciousness of the native consciousness, there has to be something that has happened on the level of consciousness to that native consciousness that would attract the so-called, let's call it the victimizer, the usurper.
Now we're thinking in 21st century mind control terms, okay? Actually, they were pure, and there was nothing about them to attract any negativity. It was the very purity and harmony of the planet and the beings on the planet that were, you might say, attracting. It was the very beauty of it that attracted these other beings who saw an opening, an easy target. This is innocence. They're looking at beauty and innocence, and it was an easy target for them. And so they just came here out of desire to control. And what better way to control than to create a division within a family? And that's the stories. I'm not a biblical scholar, and I don't even believe myself when I'm using it, but these are allegories for what happened to us. The division between two brothers is a very good example of how, dissension was inserted into our world, brother against brother.
And the reason that I bring that up, the reason that I bring that up is because, we learn about these laws, the law of attraction, and we're told by this that, if we're whole, if we're aligned with wholeness, and we're, only feeling that, that's all that will attract. We wouldn't.
That applies to now, how we are now, where we are now. It's something born of our time. Yes.
The Kabbalah has a very nice image about the fall or the being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. What they say is that you're born in peace, and then comes war. Every one of us, individually, not just on a nation level or terrestrial level, and then you fight your war, and you come back to a place of wisdom where you choose peace, and you now know that you're in peace, because the first time you were born innocent, without the knowledge and the experience of knowing the difference between the first peace and the peace that you have gained after the war. So that could be one reason why we had to be exiled, but it doesn't have to be.
And that would be an evolution. You're talking about an evolution.
First we were perfect and pure, then we fell, and we are now finding our way back to that light being that we are, to recognize that. That's the process that we're in. So a lot of these books and wisdom and teachings that are coming through to help us in the place that we are now. You know, doesn't mean that this is us eternally. It's where we are now in our evolution on Earth.
So it doesn't mean, so in a way, it's parallel